In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern. We still have about a week to go of the very cold temperatures. However, we are going to see things warm up over the course of the final week of February into the beginning of March, as I was talking about in yesterday's video. We have a massive snowstorm upcoming for states like North Carolina and Virginia, and the models are flirting with more after that as far as the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast are concerned, so we will be discussing that today. Let's go ahead and dive into things. The 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, which will be for the 23rd through 27th of February, has pushed even further eastward with this warmth, as I kind of predicted that it would do. I thought that their outlooks yesterday were a little too, I would say, reserved with the warmth, and we see a little bit of cold left over for this time period, but we'll see in a second when we look at the 8 to 14, it's going to be fully moved out. We do see a drier pattern over the south, which is semi-typical during La Niñas, so makes a lot of sense that we get kind of a shutdown pattern there, with more of the storms kind of moving through the north here, and a couple of really southern storms moving through Florida. When we look at the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, this will be for the 25th of February through March 3rd. Kind of exactly in line, like I said earlier, with what I was talking about yesterday, with the warmth basically encroaching now on the East Coast for this time frame. I think it'll even look warmer than this, and we might even get a colder pocket for the Northwest, so a little bit of a negative PNA setting up there. So I think warmer in the east than what this is showing, and colder in the Northwest is going to be what we eventually see this kind of move towards. But time will tell, of course. Precipitation opens up a little bit more. We see the Southwest still looking like pretty dry. The Northwest, though, we see a lot of diving storms through this area. We also see plenty of them move across the north. And we have near normal for the Southeast, so expect quite a few of these to move through this area as well, bringing rainfall, thunderstorms, and like I mentioned earlier, there will still be some snow threats for this kind of mid-Atlantic northeast pocket. We'll look at the past 14 or 15 days, better yet. So this will be the 2nd through the 17th of February. What we see is still a little bit of warmth for the southeast corridor. The cold is beginning to encroach on these areas. Obviously, we're looking at the past right now, so we're seeing this kind of evolve. But really, I think once this week is said and done, we'll see a large area of colder temperatures for a lot of these yellow and orange areas, and especially these areas that are kind of neutral in the northeast once it's all said and done. And we will see a warming trend take place across the west once we begin to evolve on that. Let's take a look at the European model. We see our storm is already forming out in the west. I'm making this video about 10 p.m. It's a bit of a late night special. The low is already forming near New Mexico. Some snowfall showers across some of the plains and Midwest happening as a result of this, which does mean that the model guidance is getting some of that data from the actual storm that's already forming implemented into their own model, which is actually going to increase the accuracy. Typically, this is a pretty critical point in any forecast when the storm is forming out west, and that's going to give us a great idea of what to expect moving forward. So we can expect, especially the 0Z model runs tonight, to be either a shift or showing something very similar, but we can expect that accuracy to take a big time leap as far as the confidence in that model goes. And some of that 0Z guidance is already coming out, not the European or the GFS model, but some of the short range models, and those are looking pretty similar. So if anything, a little bit of a southern trend. So yeah, I'm still kind of eyeballing the same area here. As we're moving towards tomorrow afternoon on Tuesday the 18th, this storm will be pretty much all the way going. This low kind of over eastern Texas, snowfall taking place between Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, the same areas we were talking about yesterday. As we keep this going towards Wednesday, very early afternoon, 1 p.m., we already see this snowfall beginning for states like West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, areas of northern, probably more than half of North Carolina, and the southern 2/3 of Virginia, all seeing snowfall. And it could start even earlier than this. I've kind of been trying to key in on a start date. You guys know I live in this area, so it's a little bit of something that's been on my mind, to say the least. Exciting vlog coming up, by the way, for this one, even bigger than the January, so it's going to be super exciting. We do see potential for the snow to start for these coastal areas in here where I live, maybe even 10, 11 a.m. So very early in the day, that snow is going to be starting, and it's going to be lasting through the night. So many hours of snowfall. We see it does get heavier. This is 4 p.m. for these areas. Even as we move towards 7 p.m., even heavier. 10 p.m., just as heavy. Still very heavy by 1 a.m., so that's about 12 hours of snowfall right there, and it's lightening up finally by 4 a.m. and then eventually 7 a.m. where it's still ongoing. The interesting thing is these models do kind of trend at this snowy pocket here for Ohio, West Virginia, Western Virginia, and Kentucky again, and moving straight into these similar areas of Eastern Virginia and Eastern North Carolina for the day on Thursday, where maybe these areas that have 4, 6, 8, maybe even 10 inches of snowfall might tack on another 1 or 2 inches during the day on Thursday, which of course is important. That's crucial because that is an extra 1 or 2 inches, and a lot of the snow plowing, will have already been done. So they're going to have to kind of continue to work on the roads through that following day. So I think this is all very pertinent information. As we move kind of after the storm, it's very, very cold for Friday the 21st. Saturday the 22nd, 22nd, we're warming up a little bit. We get a very weak area of snow showers, perhaps for the Mid-Atlantic and Southern New England for the 22nd, 23rd time frame here. We're about 5 days away from that, so definitely take it with a grain of salt. The models are trending at somewhat of a clipper system, working its way down into the Midwest around the 26th. And kind of wrapping around up into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. So we'll see this cause some snowfall around the 26th for the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, mostly early on the 27th for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Some potential there during that time frame. Again, we'll be watching the 25th through 27th very closely as we get a very brief stint of very, very cold Arctic air here along the eastern seaboard. So potential is there. We have the ingredients for a snow system here. We just haven't baked that cake yet, if that makes sense. So we have the ingredients laying on the table here. We need to get a lot closer to this before we even think about putting it in the oven. We do see that same kind of like clipper pattern want to prevail. This one's a little bit more north-based, but we get this Canadian system working its way into areas like the Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast with another shot of cold air around March 1st. Then we kind of move into a cold in the west, warm in the east pattern where we get this really deep diving Arctic air in the west. By the way, my kind of narrative for what I see the upcoming pattern doing is a little different than this. I feel like we're going to move into a lot more of this look much earlier, like, as in the last 3 or 4 days of February, but I might be wrong, of course. 992 is developing right there, so we're getting this indication that strong storms could be developing with cold front, warm front look, snow for the Midwest and plains. And you guys heard me yesterday. I mean, the models in the long range have been trending at storms like this that bring the plains, the Midwest, the Great Lakes major snowfall, and then just doing away with it at a certain point. So I'm a little skeptical. You should be too, based on just the way this year has gone. And it's 360 hours out, so that kind of speaks for itself. We do see a really good shot of severe weather here if this type of storm develops. So I think that's the most prominent thing to discuss, is that if we move into a pattern where this, like this model suggesting, we see major storms across the plains with a huge surge of warmth to the east and a huge shot of cold to the west, be on the lookout for more severe weather events like what we saw, I guess, like a week ago, maybe a little less. For these deep south areas, like slight risk, enhanced risk, maybe more. We'll need to be on the lookout for that if early March wants to play out this way. GFS model, as we kind of work our way through it, is going to be a little bit more north with this storm. We see that snow really flourishing over southern Virginia, mixing right to the south of that North Carolina-Virginia border. This model is going to drop way, way, way higher totals over southeastern Virginia. Nearly a foot or more on this model. The European model has a lot more for northeastern North Carolina, and it's a little weaker, more like 6, 8, 9 inches maybe as a max, with a lot more widespread, like 4, 6, 7 inches throughout southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina. So I think the GFS is the much more impactful of the two, just a little bit more north than the European model. Again, we get those snow showers moving in for the day on Thursday similarly. So again, maybe tacking on half an inch or two for the day on Thursday, which would just increase to the overall totals. As we keep going, again, we kind of move into a warmer trend, but similarly, right here for this 25th, 26th, we get kind of a mid-Atlantic northeast system, not quite as big of an Arctic blast, but this one on the 28th, 29th is much bigger. We get a major low near New York City. We're 252 hours out. The models have really struggled this year with this type of system. So right now we see it over the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. But the question is it going to be, here once it's happening, or is it going to be here instead of where it's at? We've seen this huge potential for shifts on these models compared to what I can remember in years past. Like this one, for instance. I mean, just a week ago, we saw all major models showing like the Northeast getting all this snow, and now we're talking about North Carolina and Virginia. So, really crazy stuff as far as how much these storms like to move around this year, and it makes it really hard to pin it down. So, with that being said, if you're in this area here, you could be seeing snow around the 27th, 28th, and I'm dead serious. I mean, you really can't pin it down because of just how terrible the models have been. Let's keep going. The big factor here, because you might be wondering, okay, if that's the case, why are you showing it? Well, we know that there's likely to be a storm around this kind of 25th, 27th, 28th time frame. And that's the most we can give you. That's the ingredient on the table right there. We also know that it'll be cold air, and that can't just be said for any day. A lot of people like to treat it when I talk this way. They're like, well, then you're just guessing. But it's not really guessing if we know that this is the date to watch for a storm and this is the date to watch for the cold air. That's the date that we know the potential is there. And then when we look at a day like, let me find a day, like Sunday, right? Like, yeah, we might have some snow showers down here for Tennessee and Kentucky, but I can tell you right now that this day, Sunday the 23rd, does not have the potential to have deep Arctic air and a massive snowstorm up the East Coast. So it's not just guessing. Let me move past this time frame, 28th, 29th, March 1st. Here we get another kind of coastal low, so maybe a little bit more of an active period. Here's another one for the 4th, 5th. And then, interestingly, we end up on March 5th with a little bit of a similar storm to what the European model had. Midwest, plains, and then some thunderstorm activity underneath here for a lot of the kind of deeper south. Now, again, the models have liked trying to show this type of storm in the long range, and then it really just doesn't pan out, so I am a little skeptical, and you should be too, just like the European model. Total precipitation, near normal to slightly below normal in the east, pretty above normal for the northwest. And when we look at that, that's kind of the case. Total snowfall in the European model. This swath is the storm in question here. This is actually the 18Z run. I want to do the full 0Z run. I forgot, or 12Z run better yet. So I forgot to add this in. So we see things didn't shift around too much. But towards the end, you start to get a lot of snowfall in this corridor. And there is some big question marks for, the validity of this kind of whatsoever. I'm sure these areas will get their fair share of snowfall, but more so this pocket has just been a really tough place to forecast here this year. And I guess we'll zoom into kind of your mid-Atlantic area. And again, the European model is a little further south. It does have upwards of a foot for these areas in northeast North Carolina, southeast Virginia, like very far south Chesapeake, south Virginia Beach area. Could be a little bit too far south, or it could be onto something. This model has consistently been the furthest south of this storm, I think is worth noting. Daily emojis right there. We can tell, though, that there's still a decent plowable amount for a lot of these areas across your northern peninsula, the eastern shore, into like north central North Carolina. But the GFS, as we're going to see, is going to be a lot more favorable for those areas. Again, big question marks for this area here. I want to zoom us into the the mid-Atlantic here. And we can see that kind of bullseye is just to the north. And this would be my best case scenario for myself in the vlog. And just this would be competing with, Boxing Day of 2010 if you're from this local area. Competing with the blizzard of January of 2018, I believe it was. For one of the top snowstorms in recorded history for this area. So when you're talking 12 inches plus, it gets into kind of historic territory for the southeastern Virginia area. Obviously, it's important to note that this is just the snow that this model is predicting to fall out of the sky. There likely will be some differences, but it's going to be really cold the night before. It's going to stay below freezing likely through the day on Wednesday, through the night, and then through the day on Thursday. So it's not too far-fetched to believe that almost all of the snow will accumulate in these areas because of how cold that night before is, and the fact that we're not getting above freezing during Wednesday, before this is happening. So there will be pretty minimal melting, but there could be some. So you can anticipate that this is maybe a little overdone. But we can imagine that there would be a swath to let's call it 8 to 12 inches throughout a lot of these areas. Don't know why I'm talking about the fish out here, but for the eastern shore, again, upper peninsula, lower peninsula of Hampton Roads, that kind of area would be a bullseye here. So yeah, beautiful map for me. I mean, this looks stunning. So temperatures colder, and I'm surprised by how cold the models are in the long range. I mean, here's the 19th, 20th, 21st. We could totally tell there's an Arctic outbreak moving into the southeast for this week, as I've been kind of calling for. And by the time we're reaching next week, we get a warmer pattern overall, but there's these little cooldowns that are just kind of pesky. Like we get one here Tuesday the 25th, it warms right back up, but then Thursday the 27th, then it warms right back up, and then, you know, Sunday the 2nd, another one. So we stay much colder than I've been anticipating, and really that would be the case until we get something like this, which we call a negative PNA, where the warmth is able to just really build in the east because of that strong trough in the west. This is the type of pattern you'd be looking for a more persistent, much more concrete, warm pattern like I've been kind of talking about. So I could be wrong on the warm for late February, early March. I really feel like that is the direction we're moving, but the models have been kind of inching away from that idea. So time will tell, like I mentioned. As we move on, I mean, the GFS model, I mean, again, cold through Sunday the 23rd for the east, and then we start to warm, but we get these pesky cooldowns, warm up, cool down. And this GFS model is much colder. We're still cold by March 5th here. So a much colder look here on this model through the entire forecast. I mean, when we look at a 10-day forecast, this is the 23rd through the 5th, where exactly when we're talking about the warm in the east. This doesn't look warm in the east on the GFS. This is a very positive PNA out west. This is very much so a cold pattern in the east for the 23rd through the 5th of March. So definitely goes against what I've been kind of what my idea of what I see for the upcoming pattern is. So I might need to change my philosophy on what I see for late February and early March if this is the case. But I really just feel like this cold doesn't have a lot of longevity with it. Could be wrong. I'll keep you guys updated over the coming days, of course. So be sure to subscribe. We upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.